Okay. Okay, we're recording.
Okay, so should we start with introductions and then we can get into the nitty gritty of things? Judy, do you want to go first? Nope. Golda, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm Golda David. I'm the owner and creator of the website Demystifying Education. I currently work as a facilitator in the province of Alberta in Canada. I'm an unschooling mother to one 12-year-old boy, and we started homeschooling when he was in the middle of grade 3, and I was the principal of the school I took him out of. So I was a principal as well of a school, and I've been a teacher, a high school teacher, for about 15 years before I did this. So that's me. And yes, who would like to go next? Where's Judy? Okay, Robin.
Okay, so my name is Robin Robertson. I am an unschooling parent as well. I have 2 kids. We've been doing this for about 9 years, close to 9 years now. So my son will be 15 in the fall and my daughter's 12. We started out as world schoolers and as traditional style homeschoolers until we finally slowly made our way into unschooling. I always say I had never heard of it before. I didn't know anyone did things like that. And I just kind of found myself there. And when I thought I had gone too far down the road, I started researching what was going on in our house and our learning and found out that there was something called, unschooling. I'm throwing my pen around here. And it was very much like what we were doing. So that's kind of how we found ourselves in this situation here and this learning life. I'm also the creator and host of the podcast, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, a podcast where we talk about homeschooling and unschooling, self-directed education, parenting, all of those foundations that really support the learning journey and our unique learning lives as we create it. I've worked in education in different forms, in private education, public education over many years, from teaching ESL to running project-based learning classes, being business administration, and executive at a private school. And now I currently serve as a public school board trustee in my local area as well. So that's a little bit about me, and we'll pass it over to Judy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. So my name is Judy Arnell, and I started homeschooling I have 5 kids. They range in age from, oh boy, now they're 19 to 30. So here they are. There's my kids. And I started homeschooling when the oldest 2 didn't want to go to school. And then after 3 months, they stopped listening to me. So then we kind of slid into just play and unschooling. And we unschooled all the way until high school. And then high school, we did a self-design program that met the Alberta Programs of Study. A lot of people, if you're from Alberta here, a lot don't know that you can still home educate through high school and your kids will still get a government diploma if they want to. I know there's a lot of school boards out there telling parents they can't. And my kids are proof they can. So I have 3 university graduates, and one is a master's student and one is still in university and one doesn't know what he's going to do. He's finished high school. So that's us. And I have a blog called unschoolingtouniversity.com. So, and I wrote the book Unschooling to University, which is 384 pages of my brain in there, and also following 30 of our friends through unschooling and on to post-secondary. So I'm well versed into what universities are looking for, how hard it is to get in and all that thing. So if you have questions, I've been through 4 of them already. So, hey.
All right.
We usually start with what unschooling means to each of us. I think that's a good idea this time too, because some people are new here.
Okay.
You want
to go first?
We'll go in the opposite order.
Okay. Yes. So I define unschooling as totally learner-led, totally learner chooses. So if your child wants to go to school, you're an unschooler. If they want to come home after 3 months, you're still an unschooler. So the child decides what they're going to learn, what they're going to learn, where they're going to learn, when they're going to learn, and if they're going to learn something. Okay, on to you, Golda or Robin. Robin, no, who was next? Robin.
All right. Okay. So unschooling. Yeah, I think really unschooling is, I know the unschooling sometimes has a negative connotation for people because they think it's completely anti-schooling or anti this. Unschooling really is natural learning. And I agree with what Judy says. It's learning directed by the learners, where the learner chooses the how, what, where, when, and why of their learning. Unschooling it can look like taking classes. They can have a teacher. The difference is, instead of it being imposed by a curriculum that you have to follow, or a parent or teacher saying you have to do this, it's chosen by the learner. So unschooling is absolutely empowering, but also it's one of those things too. It can be really overwhelming, because with anything, it's taking personal responsibility. I think it's so much as autonomy and personal responsibility, and that can be a lot on a person's shoulders, an individual's shoulders, for sure. So I think, and that's one of the reasons why we do this, is to take it from being overwhelming to empowering, and which unschooling really can be. So that's my definition of unschooling. And as a parent, we're helping to facilitate and support and encourage the process as well. Golda?
I actually went through a long process to get to this point where I support or understand unschooling, because I was a teacher for so long, and I was in this. I mean, I was always kind of an out of the box thinker as a teacher anyway, probably because I started quite late, and like I was in my 30s by the time I became a teacher, instead of going right into university after high school. But and when I first heard of it, I thought it was kind of like very hippy dippy, I was from BC, like some kind of movement that didn't make much sense to me. Like, how do you learn if you don't have someone telling you what to learn? Or what would you pick the right things? But I've come to know, not just from reading research and watching my own child thrive in the type of freedom that it comes with, I've also seen other children as a facilitator really grow as learners and really get excited about learning. I've seen kids that when we start off, they've been in the school system for a number of years and they hate it. Like, I'm a facilitator and I'm coming in and they're resistant, they're glaring at me, they have their arms folded, they have a hoodie on and they're covering their hair and their eyes, and they're not happy about talking to another person from another school. And a few months down the road, being excited to show me what they've learned and what they are doing and their projects that they're involved in. I have to do some convincing first that it's really is okay to decide what to learn, and that it'll lead you to where you're supposed to go. And the hardest thing of all is to just trust yourself after being in the system for a while. So I kind of took a long road. I've seen kids turn around and really embrace learning and embrace the process of it. And then the other side of that is that with great freedom comes responsibility, like Robin said. And to see young people develop a sense of personal responsibility for their lives and the direction it takes is empowering, especially after being in the school system for a while and seeing them not have any control, and then not have any skills to learn how to deal with things like peer pressure when they get out, or when they're in situations where they have to make decisions that are difficult. I'm not saying that every unschooler makes the right decision all the time, because no human does that, including myself. But I do think that giving them a sense of responsibility is important to make learners. And then, of course, it lends itself to other things like out of the box thinking, and things like entrepreneurship, where you have to really develop skills to trust yourself, to think in a different way, and to problem solve without anybody telling you how to do it. And so I've seen people grow into really competent adults who are excited about learning and are truly lifelong learners. One of the stated goals of most school divisions and most school curriculums is to create lifelong learners. Then I'm not sure we're doing that, because we're developing a resistance to learning in schools most of the time. So that's kind of my concept of unschooling and why I'm here, and how my journey, part of my journey on the way here. And Robin's podcast and Judy's book really influenced me as I was moving forward before I even met them. So I'm glad to be here.
All right.
So we're not getting questions, so we're going to have to talk more.
Okay. So facilitating our children's interests is our theme today. I don't know about, I get a lot of questions many times, especially because it's unschooling, and we talk about many times unschooling is, passion led or interest led, and it's supporting our children's journey in things that they're interested in learning or curious about. And how do we really do that if we are not creating projects for them or creating curriculum or something for them to follow and do and check off? Or what is the best way that we can facilitate their interests? Right. Thank you, Judy. Judy said you can ask any question. It doesn't have to be related to the topic. Absolutely. Yeah. So I thought, well, maybe we can start with one of the ways that each of you has found that has helped when you're starting out, maybe in the earlier years, how to support how you supported your children's interests, or maybe even the best way would maybe, let's choose an interest and different ways that you're able to support that interest. Should we start that way? Something very specific.
Specific outcomes. I like that. Who'd like to start?
Do you want to start then?
Sure.
And then after we all go, we have a question in the chat here.
Yeah, I started off, I think this will partially answer that question actually, that when I started off kind of letting go more and more, I was worried that he wouldn't get interested in anything but video games. And that is true at times. Sometimes he becomes quite obsessed, like we all can with one thing. But he transfers that obsession with things. I've seen over time my son transferring that obsession to different things. So the most recent one was scuba diving. And how do you facilitate scuba diving at this time of year with COVID, living so far away from a pool that's open? And I guess along the way, though, I found that he ran into people who knew about scuba diving, quite a few of them, including Robin. And he picked up tidbits of information along the way. He watched YouTube videos about it. He read everything he could about it. He's still really interested. He found out through one of the people who were scuba divers that he needed to learn math. And so now he's using Khan Academy to learn the type of math he thinks he needs for scuba diving. And it just kind of happens. Like there's ways to get them interested in things, but I know for my son, if I try to force or try to introduce something, it's like an automatic, no, I'm not doing that because you thought of it and I didn't think of it. And I don't want to do it now, even if it's something he would have been interested in. If I just back off, he usually finds something. Another thing he was learning for a while is he's upset. Part of his scuba diving obsession is his decision that he's going to be a millionaire someday. Even though he spends every dime he gets, he wants to be a millionaire. So he's hoping to strike it rich with the treasure. So he was actually reading a whole bunch of books on how to become a millionaire and asking people about it and how do you make money and just like, find. So I guess how to facilitate is they get an interest and then you find resources, and we're adults, so we're more well-resourced than kids are, and they don't know where to look sometimes, and sometimes they look and they find false information. So I guess that's my answer to the question, how do you facilitate learning?
Okay, so I'll go. So out of 5 kids, they had various interests, probably at different ages. So my 3 oldest kids are very close in age. They're within 3 years. so they tend to compete a lot, and it was easy to do their interests. And then the fourth child was about 3 years behind them. So he was kind of a baby toddler toddling along with the rest of them. So I think one thing we get a question all the time, like, how do my son wants to learn coding. How do I find some coding websites? And I think the thing about unschooling is if your child wants to do something, they will move heaven and earth to learn it. And they get very good at seeking things out on the internet at an early age. The things they can access usually is money and a car to get to things. So that's where you come in, is you pay for it and you drive them. But they do, if they're keen on something, they do a lot of research on how they can do it. A lot of things my kids could do at home, like writing, sewing, reading, experimenting with fire, and I'd love to talk about that more. Setting up a potion shop in the kitchen so they could sell potions to us. Things like that they could easily do at home. And I had to say yes to the mess and let them at it, and then make sure they had a part in cleaning up later. Absolutely, because I'm not the one who's sweeping up. But I tried to facilitate their interests as much as possible as I could. Now, when they got older and they had interests like doing metal work, that was a little harder to find. Back when they were 16, 17, we didn't have maker fairs or places where they could go and do things like that on their own. So that was very tough. I had to enroll them to a course, and it was very prescribed, and they hated it. And then things when they were interested in learning languages, again, when they want to do something, they'll do it. They got on the internet, they watched movies, Disney movies in the language they wanted to learn through Translate. They got on Duolingo. They facilitate a lot of what they want to do if you just give them the time to do it and the space to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I know the first question, we are kind of answering this first question, I hope. And sorry, the person who asked the question, do you have suggestions about where to actually start with kids in that facilitation of interest? If we're not answering that question, just please explain a little bit more about where you want it pointed. So I hope we're answering that, but if not, just let us know. Yeah, so where to start with kids in that facility. Also age, I think, changes things as well. As they get older and more independent, especially if they have an interest that they've been focusing on for a while, they usually do know where they want to go, or what they want to build on, or what they really want to hone in on. So many times it's, okay, we're answering. Okay, awesome. Many times it is, again, like what Judy said, either driving them there or paying for something or helping them. So I'm thinking right now, just off the top of my head. So my son, for example, one of the things, like, he has a very, very focused interest that he's really doing and learning and working in right now. But he also, like, his general big interest is the outdoors and the wilderness. And so he loves skiing, for example, like he's an avid skier. And so for us, really for him, and he's someone who he will watch ski videos for hours. He'll find all of the X Games. And I had no idea that there was that many freestyle skiers and different kinds of skiers, and, all whatever country they're from. And like, it's, he dives into that hole there and learns all about that. But also he wants to ski. So that also means that we, purchasing a ski pass. We're fortunate because we have a community ski hill 5 minutes from our house. So a family ski pass is extremely affordable in our community. The other thing is, things to make it more affordable, because it can be an expensive sport. My husband is a board member, and we both volunteer there, which means I'm a snowboard. I do snowboard patrol. So for that, we get free free skiing because of that. Little things that help. Also, if there's cost, but also as my son's gotten older, and of course equipment and things like that, he's done freestyle lessons, which means driving him an hour and a half for each lesson and an hour and a half back home. But as he's gotten older and he wants specific equipment for different kinds of skiing, the other part of it to help facilitate is supporting him to start making money and finding out how much something is, and knowing what he's going to need for the next season, and planning ahead, researching his skis, knowing what's the best kind for what he wants to do, and then helping him to save and to put money towards that, and saying, okay, we will meet you here, and then that the rest of it can be your input into there. So that's one way, for example, that we facilitated that interest for my son. And it's been many years. And as he's gotten older, more independent in it, and he's needed specific things that sometimes get a little bit difficult for us. I'm also not a huge skier. I snowboard, but the technical things he needs, as he's gotten older and more independent in it, it's really helped that he's able to research that, but also that he has that input, whether it's putting money into it and finding out that information that I really would have no idea. I'd probably go to a garage sale and buy a pair of skis from 1977 and think that they're okay and not have any idea, right? So I think the other part of it is allowing him to have his voice in that too, and say, being able to explain, this is what I want to do, and this is important, and this is why these skis are the goods, and this is what I need, not the 1977 pair from the garage sale. So I thought I'd just kind of give a little bit of a different example in that way, but yeah. So should we move to our next question? So we have, my kiddos are 8, 5, and 3. It seems we largely follow the 8-year-old's interest as he is the oldest and most outspoken. Did you find there was an age or stage that younger kiddos express their own interests apart from their siblings? I don't want the little's interest squashed by the older, louder voice. That's a really good question. Would anyone like to go first on that one?
Okay, I will. Yeah, that definitely happened in our house. The older 3 drove what we did for the days. Absolutely. And I dragged the younger 2 around to the older's activities because, they never do family activities at the same time. So, and they were fine with that, but they do naturally reach a stage where they have their own interests. And it's really interesting to see kids so different. Like my first 3 were very, very interested in trains, and yet my 2 youngest didn't want anything to do with trains. We had like 8 train sets in the house by then. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't like Lego at all. I was like, what? How can somebody not play with Lego? And they didn't, even though, and that's your job as a facilitator, is you offer it, and if they refuse, you don't worry about it. You put it away until you want to offer it again, maybe a couple months or a year down the road. But yeah, don't worry if you're dragging the little ones along with the big ones, because they will definitely have their own interests, especially as they get older, and they'll have common interests too. Like all my kids play video games, as they're a team. They're Team Arno out there, and they're quashing everybody in Fortnite and PUBG, and so they have common interests, but they definitely have individual interests, and that's good.
I can't speak as someone with a lot of siblings, because my son and daughter are 12 years apart, so she's an adult already. But I can speak as the oldest child in a family of 5 kids, and they used to follow me around and copy everything I did until they got a little older. And then the things I did weren't quite as interesting anymore, and they started to develop their own interests and not like certain things. And they get kind of stronger opinions as they get older, I think, about, well, some kids do. I know some of them are born like that, but some kids develop them over time. So I do think that that's probably going to happen, in the next few years for your littles.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And sometimes the nice thing about having the older sibling who really has that interest and focus is that they get to see it unfold for their older ones as well. And that's kind of the beauty of it. They can see how it happens for them. And then for you as a parent, it's a little bit of practice as well. So when you have those other little ones, there's different things that you can try. And, the caveat is it may not be at all the same. It would be totally different for the other ones. And what happens with the older one does not necessarily work with the other ones, but it kind of gives you a little bit of that flow beforehand. I know I definitely have an older child who is the strong driving force, who talks the most. I was actually watching an old video of my two kids as I watched my son saying something and my daughter trying to say something and him kept covering her mouth in the video. It was a reminder of, oh, right. Okay. She'd try and say a word and he'd cover up her mouth so that he could keep talking. So we definitely have had that for sure. But at the same time, my daughter has very different interests from my son, and she absolutely follows them and expresses what she wants and needs, and we support her in that too. And it's different. She has many different things that she's interested in. He has long-term focused ones, and she has kind of shorter ones where she wants to try it and she immerses herself in it, and then she's ready to try something else. So yeah, it will come. Just as when they know they have the space for that. That's, I think, really the biggest thing, is they know that you're there to support them, then they'll approach it as well.
We have another question. Do you want me to read this one?
Yeah.
Okay. The question is, my 4-year-old loves to paint, draw, Play-Doh outside doing anything, but she's not interested in learning. At 2, she could sing numerous songs and she knew her ABCs. Now, if she thinks she's learning, she won't do it. I'm not worried at all now, but I do fear that she may never come around. Free play is good so far, but I can't imagine her sitting and doing paperwork. Will this naturally happen? Does it need to happen by a certain age? I'm also losing hope for the public schooling, and this would be my first child not attending school as the norm. I have her registered because her cousins go and she wants to, but I'm letting her lead. That's a good question. I don't know if anybody wants to go first. I can answer part of that, I think. I think
Golda, and I can go after.
Sure. I think at 4 that is learning, even though, and so she must be developing some kind of resistance to a type of learning. And maybe it's because I know little people sometimes have really strong personalities and they want to feel in control. My son was like that too. He needed to feel in control. It had nothing to do with learning, but if he feels at all manipulated or forced into something, he will just be, nope, I'm not doing it, including putting his mittens on when we're going out in -40. So he resisted more the manipulation part, because he was smart enough. I'd say, I'm counting to 5, 1, 2, and then he said, what happens when you get to 5? He was a critical thinker right from age 4 or 2. But when she's playing Play-Doh and drawing and painting, she is learning that, because little kids that age learn by play. They do not learn so if she sits down and does a worksheet, for example, or writes her ABCs, she might not actually feel that's valuable because she's not actually learning it, because that's not how kids learn at that age. So I would say you might have to, if you want to try unschooling later, after, if you pull her out of school someday, I would let that go, because she will develop interests later and she will want to do the things that adults want to do, like read and do math and and understand things, because she'll get curious about them. That's my advice. I'll let Robin go next.
Well, I was also just going to ask, usually Judy has her brain charts, which is probably a good one to show as well, because I know part of the question is free play is good so far, but I can't imagine her sitting and doing paperwork. Will this naturally happen? Does it need to happen by a certain age? And yeah, for sure, when, I agree with what Golda said as well. When they're young, I think we forget that free play is innately part of us. And for so long that has been our way of learning, our way of even thinking of when they talk about dexterity and fine motor skills. All of those parts of playing with Play-Doh, playing in the sand, picking up sticks, building, painting, all of that are those elements that we need and learn naturally through play. And as they get older and as their brain develops, as their brain is moving through development, how they approach that will change and look different, and what they need and require as well will change. But I do feel that free play is underestimated, and we think of it as needing to end by age 10 or age 9. But we forget that even as adults, we learn through play. And so many skills that we keep we learn through play. And I think that I think she will get there. So many of it is our concerns and worries, right, as parents, and on all of the information that we hear that they need to do something by a certain age. We're hearing now by preschool, they should be knowing these numbers. By kindergarten, they should be reading this. By grade 1, they should be reading fluently. And if they haven't done it by this time, they're behind. We also have to remember that also the idea of schooling and learning through school, it's set up so that teachers, if they have a big classroom, they don't have to work one-on-one with kids, because as they get to a certain point, they want kids to be able to read and write on their own, so the teacher doesn't have to support them as much in that. It helps with the structure and flow of the classroom that much better, not necessarily with the developmental age of the kids. So I see Judy's got her brain charts ready. Judy?
I got my chart up. I just want to also say, just like you guys are saying, that play is unschooling. Unschooling is play, and it doesn't stop at age 6. And like you said, it doesn't stop at age 13 or 25. When I speak to groups of people, I get them playing, I get them doing something, and the learning sinks in so much more. That's the part they remember, rather than just me up there talking away. So it's very, very good. Play is learning. And I think we have to get out of that mindset that play is frivolous. It's what you do when you're not learning, but it really is learning at all ages. And like Golda said, playing Play-Doh, my kids played all through their childhood. That was their main way of learning. It was play, it wasn't school. And they took a math course at somewhere either grade 8 or grade 7. They took their first math course, and that's when this frontal lobe is developing. So from about age 6 to 12, that frontal lobe is developing their higher order cognitive skills, thinking, planning, problem solving, emotional processing. So that's when children learn best through hands-on experiences. This past year has been horrible for children, not because they haven't had online school, but it's school that doesn't meet their developmental need to touch all their 5 senses. They need to see, hear, smell, taste, talk, feel the world they're learning about from ages 6 to 12. Then at age 13, that's that magical age they enter puberty, they start getting their abstract thinking skills and their prime executive function, all in this prefrontal cortex, so this front part of the brain here. And that's when kids can start to think very abstractly. So that's when my kids learned how to add fractions on paper, how you change the denominator to a common denominator, and then you do the same thing to the numerator. Before that, they knew a concept of combining fractions, and they sure in the heck knew when their siblings got a bigger piece of pizza than they did. But for them to actually figure it out on paper, they didn't do any of that until age 13. And then they skipped grade 9, and then they went into high school math. And 4 of my kids are in STEM careers. So if you want to watch our session on math, that's very interesting in that you do not have to teach math. Kids learn math through play and experiential learning. So I hope this kind of helps. It kind of shows you that this frontal part is the last part of the brain to develop, and especially the teenagerhood right here.
You were screen sharing at first, Judy, and then we couldn't see it. I don't know if you knew that you had taken it off or not.
Oh, dear. Okay. Well, that's funny because it showed here. I'm sorry. Did you see any of the brain?
Just when you showed it briefly. Oh, there, now it's screen sharing.
Okay.
I know, Judy, you have this on your website as well, right?
No.
Okay.
But it's in all our other unschooling videos. But I just want to say that from 6 to 12, the frontal lobe is developing. So think first grade frontal lobe. And then from age 13 onwards to 25, the prefrontal. So think puberty, prefrontal. And then it kind of helps you remember which part of the brain. And this frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, this part is where kids start doing things on paper and learning through book work rather than experientially. Okay, does that make sense?
A good diagram. Yes. So yes, so the response is yes. Wow, that's great. We got homework at kindergarten registration. Wow, thanks everyone. Hey, yeah, she's not in. Fair enough. That's so interesting. Okay. But I remember my kids' school, they had homework at kindergarten as well. They had homework every week to take home for the weekend that had to be ready for Monday. So, and at that time I thought it was fantastic. So look how things change, right? So
See, my kids went, I had three kids that went to kindergarten and they never got homework or worksheets. It was entirely play-based back in the 90s. But the pressure is coming down, and it's a lot of parents who want their kids to start doing worksheets in kindergarten, and the teachers are feeling the pressure. So even if you decide to send your kids to kindergarten, they need to hear from parents who don't want that pressure too and want a play-based experience. Right, Golda? Do you think they do?
Yep, I agree. I think there's a lot of pressure, and there's also a shift towards like shifting up, like making them do things develop. I mean, there's a new curriculum here in Alberta that they're going to pilot next year, and quite a lot of it is developmentally inappropriate, and I think they're just trying to shift it up. And they've been doing that for quite a few years, so it's disturbing to see. I mean, this child is not even in kindergarten yet. She's just registered for next year and already getting homework. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'd have to say, I think because my kids just played from ages 0 to ages 15. They did all their play, they did their fun, they loved it. When they actually started high school work, because then if you want credit for high school, you do have to meet the outcomes of the Alberta programs of study. If you're in Alberta, it works differently in other parts of the country and the world. But they were very keen to do that work because they hadn't had 9 years of being forced to do it. And same with university. They were super keen. They were great students. They put their hand up. They were keen learners. And it's because they weren't burned out from so many years of being forced to do assignments that they had no interest in.
Yeah, I agree. It gave them a different mindset and approach to learning. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
Do you want me to read the next question or?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have, yes, Robin, you can borrow my skis.
Just to show them to my son. I'll wrap them up as a Christmas present this Christmas and say.
I know, I love them. Question is, how do you encourage a family mindset of everyone's interests are important and that we sometimes have to do things that may not be of interest to them. Does this question make sense? So when you're doing communal family things that one person is going, this sucks, I don't want to do this. How do you handle that one? Does somebody want to go first? Robin?
Yeah, I can talk to that one. Well, I guess for us, it's a little bit different because I have 2 kids. So I don't have 5 kids, for example, that I would be managing all different or supporting all different interests in that way. But I found that as my kids got older, when they needed something or wanted to focus on something and they needed support for that, we've actually found a way to work it into the schedule, I guess you could say. So they've kind of said, so for example, if my daughter wants time just with me, my son is the one who sleeps in the latest and she likes to get up a bit earlier. So she, as part of that, she also knows that it's just going to be her and I, and she's just going to have that time. So she kind of makes it a priority to be up earlier so that she can have that focused time with myself, because she knows her brother will be getting up later and things might be flowing different. So I know that's one way that my kids have kind of worked it out on their own, because many times they don't have those shared interests. And then we kind of, make in the day, we make something a time to do something together. And I think we've just learned through the communication and flow how that works best for everyone. And if it's something like I'm thinking of, say someone wants to go somewhere and like say it's a museum or a field trip, and not everyone is really interested, but everyone has to go there together because that's just how it's working out for that day. We usually talk about maybe there's something in the same day or maybe the next day that we can support someone else's interests. So for example, maybe this is a museum that I'm just thinking my daughter wants to go to see something specific and my son's not really interested in it. We might, play on the playground for most of the time while we do something else. Or I think, we went to the Coolies at the beginning of the year. My son's actually not even here right now. He's off in northern BC. So, but when he was here, we decided to do some nature journaling and look up different plants. He was happy to do it for a little bit, but then after that, he was totally like my daughter did it for the hours and she was happy. My son, not so much. And that was okay. He actually brought other things with him. He brought his elk collar to practice his elk calls. And I brought food for everybody. So he was happy just like munching on things and doing things around, looking out for bears and just kind of walking around the area, because what we were doing wasn't his focus interest at the time. So I hope that helps, but I see it also as ways to also support others' interests and facilitate that. But at the same time, making it something that is an activity that is not just about the activity, but it's also about our time together, our connection together. And sometimes it might just be, it's a space for conversation. It's a space to express something or learn something about another family member, or for us just to communicate. Sometimes it's nice to get away from even the house and do something else so that we can have that time to talk about something that maybe is bothering us, that all of us can talk about and express. So many times that's also it is, we don't even look at it as supporting interests or in that way, but it's also just a time for us to connect and be together as well. So I hope that answers it a bit.
I remember when my husband was working away in another country. So he was working a shift where he was away 24 days, home 10. So the 24 days he was away, I had to handle all 4 kids. And it was really awful. So one kid would be in a bowling league Saturday mornings. And then I had to bring the other 3 kids because I couldn't leave. We had no family here. I had no help. And they were cranky. They were fighting each other because they didn't want to be there. I had to keep them entertained. It was just horrendous. And eventually I just broke down and I bought 3 Game Boys. And it was fabulous. That was our screen time back then. that worked. But other times too, I used a babysitting co-op. We got a homeschooling babysitting co-op together, and I could drop the other 3 kids off for the bowling, and that worked really, really well. So there are ways to work around it, but sometimes, you know, you got to tell them you just got to suck it up, and there's nothing we can do, and try and make it, like you said, Robin, make it family time. I would bring board games. I'd bring a deck of cards. I couldn't sit on my phones or actually do anything for me. I had to keep the kids engaged, but it was good family time, as well as the car trips. Some of our best discussions and learning were driving somewhere and driving back in traffic, because we'd play card games, we'd talk about issues as the kids moved into the teen years. It was the best social studies lesson ever. I don't think kids in school get that much conversation with adults. It was just amazing. So yeah, that's how we handled it. How about you, Golda?
Well, I'm a single mom with 1 child at home, so I can't speak to that very much, honestly. And my parents were very top-down authoritative, where you're going to do it because I told you to do it, and I don't want to hear any whining, or there's going to be consequences kind of people. So I'm learning from you too about how to navigate that.
And I do want to say, like Judy said, you know, it's not always times in the flow. It's not always perfect times. There's definitely times when it's like, okay, everybody, let's find a way to get along here. This is happening and this is where we're going, and let's work this out. But then again, it's a great way to practice our communication and those skills as well. So yeah. Shall I read the next question? Okay. So we have Robin's podcast guest, Carla Marie Williams. Said a parent's job is exposure, as random and as wide and as deep as you possibly can. Expose them to new people, cultures, places, careers, industries, ideas, concepts, resources, to the point that they are going to find out what is for them and what is not for them. This message really resonated with me. If it speaks to your experience as a parent/facilitator, how did it play out in your unschooling home? That's a great question. And Carla Marie is she's such an interesting person to speak with as well too. I love Carla Marie. Do one of you want to go first, or did you want me to start with this one? You can, okay, Gold is pointing at me, okay. So how did it play out with your unschooling home? Well, maybe these evening ones are good, huh? We started out traveling. So I think just the experience of being in the moment absolutely helped in all of that. And it was a lot of exposure. My kids had exposure to new languages, people that were similar to them, people that were different. They've been able to say that they've lived in places where they are majority. They have been in places where they are minority. Where, you know, life is just completely different, and absolutely it gave them really great perspective on life and others. But it helped with interest too. I think my kids, you know, one of the things actually that was really interesting that I find now, that we had a chance when we lived in the city, for example, we went to museums quite a bit, and like art, we went to art galleries. And they had a lot of exposure because of where we lived. We lived in Seoul for a little while. And so there were some fantastic art exhibits that came there. There was one a Picasso exhibit that was like a unique exhibit, that it wasn't his usual works, but it was quite a bit. Some I knew, some I had never known he had done, but they were actually really interested in it. And I know it's those things that there was, I think, a Matisse exhibit that we went to, things that they had a chance to see that now they still talk about art in a certain way that allowed them to see and be present with it. And then when we go away to other places, we usually do the same as well. But absolutely exposing to other people and mentors has been a big thing as well. I find what happens as your kids get older too, and they have the time to really focus on an interest, at first we can help them, like we can strew, we can get materials, we can get resources that we need, we can pay for certain things, but it really gets to a point where our kids surpass us in their information they have and the knowledge that they have and the know-how. And really maybe the only thing we can provide for them is a ride and money. Like really that's because they know so much more than we do. There's nothing that we can really show or teach them. So it gets to a point absolutely that they just need to be exposed to other people in certain areas and experiences so that they can grow in that aspect. And I know for my son, for example, he has surpassed, like he's really into hunting and wildlife and fishing and the outdoors. And I mean, what I know is pretty minuscule compared to what he knows on that. And so it's really been important for us to find others that know a lot in those areas. And he's also searched that out, and that's given him so much experience and insight. So that's where he is right now. He's working for an outfitters right now in the far northern BC. And it's great experience for him, so much that we actually could never even, I can't drive him to something like that. But through his focus and really trying to connect him with mentors and experiences, he's able to do that and be there full time in that and get experiences that he wouldn't have otherwise. So that would be a personal experience. My daughter, she loves music, and it's the same. I could only, my musical talent or skills only go so far. So absolutely, she's, voice lessons and singing lessons. There's one camp that unfortunately it's been closed for the last 2 years because of COVID, but guitar camp where it's a week long, stay overnight, full on immersive guitar camp that my kids love. And that's been great to connect them with musicians and that knowledge that I just don't have as well. So that would be our personal experience in that. I'm passing it on. Judy, does that mean yes, you want to go? Or yes, you're pointing to Golda?
I'm backwards here, so I don't know where I'm pointing. Okay, I'll go, I guess. I agree with you, Robin, for sure. Like in the early years, you do some strewing, right? But as your kids head into the tween years, like around 10 to 13, they start becoming very capable. And I think if you have a 6-year-old, you cannot imagine how capable and how self-sufficient your child's going to be in facilitating their own interests. But yes, I mean, we did things like I took my kids to the theater. I can't believe I took a 4-year-old to the Nutcracker. It was horrid. Make it age appropriate for sure. I would enroll them in day camps in the summer to give them exposure to different things, lessons. And now my kids in their ages 20, they don't remember any of that stuff. What that stuff did was not give them knowledge or skills. It just developed their brain connections. And video games would have done the same thing too, really. They didn't retain anything they learned in those years, but it was good. It got us out of the house and stuff. But my kids, around age 13, they were really interested in things I had no interest in. Things like metalworking, hacking computers, car machinery. Ew, like there is no way I want to have anything to do with that. I'll drive them to the library so they can find a book on it, but I am not doing anything other than that. And they, like I say, you can't force a child to learn, and you cannot stop a child who wants to learn. Cannot stop them. They will nag you to get you things and to further their interests. So, and I've seen it. I mean, I have a son who taught himself German in order to go and do a work term in Germany for his university program. And he was so motivated. He found the way he wanted to learn. All I do is say, oh, neat, you're learning German. Same with another son. He's teaching himself piano. He is so amazing. He's not doing lessons. It's all self-taught. which is way cheaper, but he's good. Oh, if I could record and show you what he plays, it's amazing. Same with another child writing novels. I know nothing about writing novels. I don't even know anyone who teaches about writing novels, but they get the resources off the internet or wherever they can find it, mentors, and they further their interests. You cannot stop it. So at some point, they know way more than you do. And I've definitely reached that point where I think 4 of my kids know way more about me, about things I don't, especially the dark web. I don't know much about that. Golda, to you.
Just that your email is on there. Yeah, I actually was going to say something very similar, that I know you can expose children to things, and I think it happens automatically instead of being driven. I know that the people who started this year are probably saying like to themselves, but how? But it's only because in the pandemic, we were so highly limited, especially here in Canada and Alberta, because we weren't allowed to really have a lot of experiences. So this was a particularly frustrating year. So if anyone is here and they're new, that's not a normal experience to have. The thing is, in the homeschool world, there's lots of homeschool groups. And I find that when kids talk to each other, they can pique each other's interests about certain things. And then they come home and they do it or look into it, or they'll be watching a YouTube video and somebody in a comment will have said something and they'll be like, I wonder what that is. And there's just so many ways, when I grew up, there was no internet yet. And we still found our own interests without being able to access all of the power of this internet that we have now. I find that YouTube and all of those things have really helped kids find their interests. And I think it kind of comes to us in life anyway. So I'm speaking as an adult who's developed multiple interests over time. Nobody exposed me to them. I just found something that made me interested. And so I got obsessed with it because that's what I do. And I just started learning, and I learned through lots of resources, talking to people, going to the library, finding books, buying books, going on the internet, watching videos about it, or whatever it was. I think back of when I first moved to Alberta and got interested in hobby farming and got kind of obsessed with chickens for a while. And you can't stop yourself from learning something that you're interested in. It's really, really hard. I remember that because I was supposed to be writing master's degree papers and not writing them, but researching chickens instead. So I think although it's good to expose kids to different things, I think it will happen naturally. I know it did with me. I specifically, of course, I did a lot of really odd things. As a single mother, I went to China with my son when he was 4. So he got exposed to a different country and language and culture and things like that, and food. And so and then from that they learn. So I think knowledge expands. So when you learn one thing, it leads to other things, and then those lead to other things, and it's kind of like a network of knowledge. And we all have a unique set of knowledge base and experience sets. So you have to kind of trust too that they will have that themselves. Nobody sits there and doesn't learn all day. It's not possible. Humans always try to expand. So that's kind of my answer, vaguely, because I agreed with most of what Judy said. That it just happened.
Does your son remember a lot about China or just a few highlights?
Yeah, he just remembers a few highlights. We were there from where he was age 4 to 6. And so he remembers very specific things about China, but forgets a lot of the experience. And I probably have too, because even though I have an adult brain, I mean, you can only remember certain experiences, but yeah, but he got an overall sense of things. So when you're exposed to another culture, you learn that people think differently than you. I think that's the bottom line. In like, he learned Chinese, so he learned that language expresses different things in different ways. For example, you cannot express things in English that you can say in Chinese, and vice versa. There's some things in English some ideas and ideologies that you cannot express in Chinese. So those things he learned young. So I think that's anybody who places them in a different culture learns that. Yeah. So it's an overall learning. Like there are different places out there and people are different. They have different ideas about things. And their food is really way more better than ours, is what he used to say. And he liked tricking me, so that was another. He could speak Chinese and I couldn't. Yeah. There was another question here. Do you want me to read this one?
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
Okay. So this is mostly for Judy, I think. I'm trying to find the balance with screens. I'm curious, what was the progression of your kids in the use of screens? My husband's a programmer and I don't want to villainize screens, but it seems like the more that screens are in our lives, the more my kids struggle to find other things to do when screens are not on. My kids are 4 and 6, so still young. I know I have to de-school myself with screens as well, but I'm curious of progression of screen use from young kids to older kids. And you're about to give a webinar on this subject, Judy. So yes, she's a perfect person to ask.
Yeah. So the science behind screen time is, I'll show the brain again. And we did a session on this, right? Yeah. I think maybe, yeah. So if you go to unschoolingtouniversity.com, I put our webinars up there under videos and podcasts, so you can listen to that one there. But so what the medical community says about screens is that when kids are learning language, so the bottom brain functions, so the parietal lobe, temporal lobe, are all involved in language development, and that's basically around age 0 to age 5. So limited screen time use is really good around that, because they want kids to learn a rich variety of language. They want kids to talk to parents and adults and siblings. And oftentimes when too many people are on their screens, they don't talk to each other. And we're raising the silent generation. So they need to learn language from another person, not from Dora on a screen or Peppa Pig on an iPad or anything like that. So that's where it really matters. But after kids have good language skills, so after about age 6 on up, there's not a lot of studies on screen time use. And there's nothing that really says it's detrimental. In fact, the Canadian Pediatric Society, American Academy of Pediatrics, both took off school age recommendations for screen time because parents all over the world were exceeding them. And they said, okay, so what they say instead is moderation. So in our house, my husband loves video games, and he brought them into our house probably when the oldest kids were about, I say 4 or 5. They were playing StarCraft. They didn't know how to read. They didn't know how to write. So, but they knew about cheat codes. So every 5 minutes, I'd have to write in the cheat code for StarCraft, like, I know Power Overwhelming and Operation Seawall till the day I die, because I've written that so many times. But they learned actually to write through playing video games. They learned to read through playing video games. My child with ADHD learned to manage his attention through video games. And we are a gamer family. All the kids play, even to this day. We did not limit screen time, but we made sure other things happen. So we made sure that we had a family meal together with no screens, including adults. We made sure that when visitors were over or relatives came, that the children would engage and not be on their screens. And we made sure that other things got done, like a job takes priority. And very often kids get to that point on their own developmentally. So this graph kind of shows you development of self-control, which is that prefrontal cortex 2, which really kicks in about age 13 on up. So you can see about age 17, the brain is taking that final leap in developmental self-control. And that's a really good age when kids say, I know Nintendo just released Animal Crossing, but I'm going to put that on the back burner. I'm not going to buy that until I'm done this research paper for university or high school or whatever. They're getting more self-directed in priorities and planning, which is going to occur naturally. But until then, kids love screens. They're very educational. In my webinar, I talk about the benefits, how they teach critical thinking, cooperation, um, all kinds of wonderful creative benefits. But it's up to you and how much your family can stand watching your kids on screens. And it's also how your children react to them too. And we know that, 6-year-olds, if they have too much screen time, they become really antsy and physical, and they may, start kicking their brother. You know your child best on when and how their limits are. So I'm just saying how we handled it in our home. And I have a huge chapter on the many benefits of video games in my book and on the blog. And you have to decide where those parameters are. But so far, the science is that screen time is not addicting, and it does have very many benefits, especially as we're heading into STEM careers. A lot of there are studies coming out that kids who play a lot of video games are very well versed in coding, in modding, in cybersecurity and hacking. I mean, I have a son who is now the one I worried about the most, who I thought would be totally addicted because he was playing 12 hours a day at age 7. He is now working for a major video game maker in as a career. So it's definitely paid off. And the rest just do it for fun. So that's our kind of our pathway. Robin, do you want to go down?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know early on when we first started, we actually did have screen time limits. And that was also, when we were really trying to replicate our ideas of school and before we really understood a lot of autonomy and supporting interests and all of those other things that come along with it as well. So we started out with that. I think we did like half an hour of reading and writing for an hour of screen time. It was kind of like an exchange. That worked for a while. The kids were fine with it. And then they quickly figured out that the more that they would, the more reading and writing they could do, the more screen time they would have. And then, after as anything, they, begin to negotiate and want more screen time, and, you lax on things and you kind of go back and forth. Now we don't really have any limits. The one thing is I ask, if for them to directly before they go to sleep, to take some space from the screens before they go to bed. Same as with Judy as well. Family time, screens are away. Dinner time, we eat together, screens are away. But to be honest, sometimes it's just as hard for us as adults. I know like my kids will not have devices at the table, but then I'll notice that my husband and I both have our phone right beside us at the table, and my phone will bing and I'll check a text or a DM or something like that. And my kids are the ones who will say like, can you put that away? So it's interesting how so much of our concerns and worries are for our kids and that, but I find that I need sometimes to really focus myself and manage my own time as well. So, the modeling in that, if that's what we want as well. But, I think it's as well with the family and how it goes for families as well. And for each of the kids, my kids, I know both of my kids, they learn a ton through their screens as well, especially during COVID. They, gaming with their friends was a huge thing for them. That's when they got to hang out with their friends and be together. And my daughter actually has a regular Fortnite date with a friend of hers. And that's when actually they spend the most time together, is their evening Fortnite games. And then they'll, on their weekends as well too. So the screens also have evolved over the years from, what was a screen for us as to what our screens for our kids as well. So, yeah, I think for us, it's just always finding, what works, and then we change it. And especially as our kids communicate what they need, and as they're growing, then we adjust it that way as well. And for my son, it's interesting because right now there's no power where he is. They have a generator that they'll kick on at night. So he can't watch any movies or anything like that. But the funny thing is his, I guess, boss, basically the person that he works most closely with, where he's kind of like the right-hand helper in that. They've connected really well, because not only do they love the outdoors, he's the main guide that he helps them on, but on his downtime, his two favorite things are anime and Minecraft. And lo and behold, that's for my son as well. So when they do have, when they have to go to the closest town to get something, and say it's an evening, and they have the Wi-Fi, they're able to play. That's what they do. They play anime, they play Minecraft, and they talk about anime all the time. So, this guy's 25, and he said he still loves anime. He has down winters because he has to work nonstop in the summer and spring. But he says he watches a lot of anime to this day and plays a lot of video games still. But he's actually going to take over the company. It's a huge outfitter and area. He's very capable, and but then he doesn't have any concerns with that. And he says, I have a lot of time, and that's what I like to do with my time as well. So I think I've talked way too long, so I'll hand it over to Gold.
I think I'm famously wishy-washy about this subject. I find myself always trending towards like more and more control for my own self about this issue, and less trust in him. And then I'll attend one of these Q&As with Judy, and she'll convince me all over again to have no limits. and it will for a while, then I'll start sliding back towards control. So there's like this monthly update download into my brain. And I do worry about the same thing as other parents do, about how it affects his behavior. So if I see it affecting his behavior, then I get worried. And it does sometimes. So we have to negotiate. And I like Judy put the family contract in the chat box for you guys to go to and download it. And I thought that was a great idea, like to have a contract, like here's the negotiation, let's put it down on paper, because my son will forget the negotiation. And I feel like writing it down might really help us both remember what we had promised each other. I worry about the same things, that he won't be interested in anything else. But I don't find that that's true, actually. So there was I read about when we were doing the Q&A on screen time, I read something in one of the other unschooling podcasts. It was like the transcript. I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically about the metaphor was ice cream. If you have one scoop of ice cream, it's the best ice cream in the world. And then you have 2 scoops and it's still pretty good, and 3 and 4. But how many scoops of ice cream, or how much screen time do you eventually get filled up and don't want anymore? And that's kind of what happens, especially if there's something interesting going on. So I thought deeply about that, and how maybe there just needs to be different things to do that's like instead of pushing them out of screen time, try to pull them out when they kind of reach that I can't say that word, but that level where they're full up. Saturation, thank you. I saw.
Saturation point, yeah.
Yeah, the saturation point where they've had enough, just like with ice cream, because nothing that we do, we can go overboard sometimes as humans, but nothing we do is ever going to not fall out of our interest range at some point in time. So capitalizing on those times might work as well. So that's just some more ideas about how to handle it. And yeah, I struggled with the same thing though, as you did, as a lot of parents do, about how, and then there's all these scary things about how it's addictive. And I think if a child is addicted to anything, like anybody who's addicted to anything, it's a lack of connection and they need connection with other people. So maybe addressing the core reason why is more effective than just banning screen time in general, because they need to be connected. So those are my ideas. I think we only have a few minutes left until 7:30.
Yeah.
Just
We have
to remind-
another question as well in the chat
Yeah.
box.
There was, yeah.
Okay, is it my turn to read?
I think so.
Okay, the question is, I do worry about finding the resources and introducing my kids to enough on a tight budget. How can I give them the most on a tight budget? I just want to make sure that they're not missing opportunities. Any recommendations for cheap experiences to explore their interests? Yeah, okay. I just want to add something. I'll start with this one, but I'll be really quick. Is that go outside. There's parks, there's picnics, there's a lot of free stuff you can go to when your kids are young. And like Golda said, everything was closed, but there's so much you can get out and do. And one thing I like to do, as my kids got into about age 8, 9, 10, I started clubs for them. And so we had a video game club, Golda, which turned into a peer mentorship coding club, which was awesome because some of the kids they knew how to program C++. So they taught the other kids. And then some kids, like my son, knew more about hacking. So he taught the other kids. And it was definitely a peer teaching club. And sometimes they just ended up playing video games, but it was so much fun. And it was socialization. And then we had a Minecraft club on Friday afternoons. And then we had a girls' book club on some evening. We had library day where we take the kids to the library and just let them loose. And there's so much you can do that's free, I think. And if you don't mind opening your home out to facilitate a club where kids come over, we got the parents to alternate bringing snack every week. So all I had to do was provide the bathroom and a table and the internet. But look at ways you can do things like that. Okay, Golda, you're next.
Yeah, I agree that there's lots of free stuff, and I understand the concern because I see him getting, he wanted a virtual reality headset. He did get one eventually, but I couldn't afford that. They're $800. Like, it was expensive. And so there's some, and the scuba diving, that's going to be really expensive too. And I'm a single parent, and I have a hobby farm and a household, so I know about budgeting and how you're trying not to spend too much money. So I agree with Judy that there's lots of things that you can do, having people over. In this area, we have a homeschool group where we go do events, and those are usually free. We try to do things like game days, and we did have a video game day, except that place is closed now. We had art lessons where everything was provided, I think, for like $5 or something. So that's something, if you live in a place where it's not provided, you could organize with other parent groups to do, because it was $5 because that's how much the material cost if we spread it out over a certain amount of families. So it was cheap. Like, so there's different things you can do. If they get interested in something expensive like scuba diving, you might have to budget, like you might, that's a good learning thing for them to save up money so that they can do something they want, because that's what they're going to have to do anyway. Like, if your child wants a car and you say, okay, I have $2,000 for a car, whatever, you're going to have to make up the rest. Then they get a job and they learn how to make money. My son sold eggs in order to make money for one of his things that he was interested in, or like set them up with small businesses. And I think in certain areas, the farmers markets are free for kids, like, or they're really cheap tables for kids, so they can, just have them think about how to raise money on their own, especially as they get older. And when they're young, they don't usually have expensive hobbies unless it's like dance or hockey or something. So yeah, that's my suggestion, is to get them to fundraise and try to find free things to expose them to. There's always a way to do it. There's lots of people homeschooling with not a big budget.
Yeah, I agree as well with both Judy and Golda. Sometimes it's for getting together. Homeschoolers usually do quite a bit, and it's just sometimes a matter of opening up your own home and organizing activities on your own, and doing that. I know we've also had sports days and things like that, like every other Thursday, where we pooled together and we rented the college gym, for example. And it was like, yeah, I think it was, per family ended up being $5 for months kind of thing. And they had all the sports equipment and everything like that. Judy said clubs can run to the library too, just need an organizer. Absolutely. I know our library in town, they're fantastic. They will open up and really everything is like, they've had authors in for homeschool author visits. They always, all of the books, they usually know what the kids like and will say, I know my kids will say, oh, I saw this book came in, I put it aside for you because I knew you were reading the series. And the library has been fantastic. And also now they have a lot of online resources as well that we take advantage of quite a bit too. And then things like toys and stuff like that, it's actually, sometimes there are toy swaps. I know a friend of mine who used to actually be in the area, she moved away, but she created on Facebook, a Facebook group. She's in BC now, but it's kind of like a toy mart or toy swap where they, you can bring your toy, say, I have this, I'm looking for this, who's ready to swap with me? And then you just have a meeting place. And that helped with a lot of resources as well too. So I purchased a lot of things like games too, board games that can be expensive at secondhand stores. Secondhand stores have been fantastic. And then there's also Facebook groups where a lot of parents sell things for a reduced price for homeschoolers too. So yeah, there's a lot. Sometimes we just have to be creative as well. And honestly, sometimes my kids love playing with bubble wrap for hours on end. Something simple, things you don't expect, or just, I think my son had hammer and nails, and he hammered, there's like nails throughout our house. You'll see where he got in a nailing frenzy and just nailed everything he could with a hammer. So yeah, just bubble wrap and boxes. Absolutely.
It was boxes and wood outside and forts in this house.
Yes, forts. Yeah, fire. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And cooking. My kids have loved baking with me and finding and cooking in the house and what we can find and do. And that's been excellent as well. So, and the thing is, if you're in Alberta, you do receive funding for your homeschool child for resources. So if there's certain things that you need and want, that will cover your homeschool resources as well. So that's another support that you have too. I'm just reading the chat as it's going through too at the same time as talking. So we're at 7:25 right now. I know we're going to end at 7:30. Is there anything that we want to add as a last wrap up for the last few minutes? And thank you everyone for your comments and questions in the chat. It's wonderful.
I have a question. I think we've done 6 of these now. And I have them all posted at unschoolingtouniversity.com. Robin, where do you post the videos?
Yeah, so they go up right away after on my Patreon page for my podcast. So usually patrons get it first. Patreon.com/honey, I'm homeschooling the kids. They're on there. And that's the only place that I have them posted right now. So if you go to patreon.com/honey, I'm homeschooling the kids, if you're a patron, you will receive them as well. For those who are patrons, I'll probably be doing something else for each month of the summer, that if we're not hosting this through the summer. There's a few little things I've had in mind and putting feelers out, like some screenings and stuff like that for some unschooling shows. So, but I'll let patrons know what's coming up for that I'm hoping to have for July and August too. So.
Nice. So maybe we should run through where people can find us. Robin, where can they find you?
So you can find me on my podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, which is on any podcast player. Just type in Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. My website is, you can find it through Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, but it's actually imhomeschooling.com. I see Golda typing. She's the best. She's fast. I'm guessing she's probably typing it in right now, the links. If not, I can add them in. And also social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and on Clubhouse as well. So social media on Instagram and Facebook, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, and Clubhouse. I have a club, Honey, I'm Homeschooling, or you can find me on my name, Robin Robertson. I do host 2 rooms a week on Clubhouse. So we talk about unschooling and homeschooling, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time and Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Mountain Time.
Okay,
that's
and Golda.
You can find me on Instagram at just Golda is my tag, and then I'm demystifyingeducation.com as well. And then my phone number and email address is on there as well.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've actually been teaching parenting and child development for 25 years. So I have a parenting blog, judyarnell.com. And then my education blog is unschoolingtouniversity.com. And I'm on Instagram and all over Facebook too. So it's been fun doing these.
And I do want to say, Judy, and for anybody that hasn't made it to Clubhouse yet, they do have it for Android now. It's open for Android. So if you need an invite, just let me know and I can send you an invite. I do have invites available if anyone would like to join Clubhouse. You still need the invite, but I've been letting my listeners know, and homeschoolers and unschoolers, we want to grow the community on there. So just let me know and I can send you an invite. And it'd be great to do these rooms on Clubhouse as well too. So.
Hey, Robin, I need an invite.
Hey, I'll send you one.
Thank you. Well,
Great to know. Then I'll be able to, right now I can only get it on my iPad. So I have to be like inside and like with the internet, and now I could go anywhere. That's great. Yeah. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming too. I appreciate the time that you took tonight to come and listen to us. And of course, you too as well to come and talk. That was great.
yes, this is fun. So I hope everybody has a really good summer. And I love summer unschooling. My kids learned so much because all the books came back to the library. All the schools and teachers would bring the books back, and then we get free reign of everything. It was the best time. So I hope you all have a good, fun, more open summer.
Yeah, yes, everyone enjoy, absolutely. And I guess we will be in touch with everybody as to what we're looking for the fall. So if we can send an email out or just watch our social media as well, and we'll be in touch. So yeah, summers for us are usually road trips. So that's always something fun to do.
Nice.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice. And send us
Thank you,
your
Golda and
ideas
Judy.
for topics. I don't like if we do certain topics and certain things too. Okay. Well,
For Clubhouse, what information? So if you are on Clubhouse, I actually need your phone number because the invites are text only. So I will put my phone number on here. So that's my phone number. I download the app on your phone first. It's Clubhouse app. So download the app. And actually, I'm thinking I should probably add a tag on my Instagram page on my bio so that you can just go, and that'll be the easiest, I think, because I think you can do that now and just tap right in. If I was on my phone, I could send this, but let me see here. But that is what I suggest you do. Just download the app first and then let me know and text me your number, and then I will text you the invite so you can get in. And then just look for Robin Robertson. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
great. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.